Hey guys, today we're going to be making puff pastries, so let's get into it. Okay, here I have 1.5 cups of plain flour, and to that I've just added a pinch of just plain salt. Yep. And then here I've got about 30 grams of butter. We need to let this soften a little bit, so I've cut it up into little bits so it'll rub in better to the flour. And here I've got 1/2 cup of water, and I've actually put some ice cubes in it because the water has to be very cold. Alright, so with the butter, make sure it's not too melted. We don't want it melted, just a little bit softened. Alright, see you guys in a bit. Alright, so here we have the butter in with the flour and the salt. So with this, we're just going to rub it in. So you make sure that you get lots of flour in the motion and just rub it across your fingertips. And we're trying to rub the butter in, but we don't want it to melt. So we got to make sure that we don't touch it too much. And when you do it, just pick it up quite a bit, quite from a height, so it gets some air into it. It might be a bit messy, but it's a good way to make pastry. So make sure you get lots of air in it and just rub it through your fingers really nicely, really gently but firmly, if you know what I mean. So we keep doing that until we get kind of a fine breadcrumb consistency. We don't want lumps of butter, and we want it to be evenly mixed into it. So I'm just going to do that, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's in the breadcrumb form. So depending on the purpose of what you're going to use your puff pastry for, you can use unsalted or salted butter. I'm going to be using salted today, since I'm going to be making some sausage rolls out of mine. So yeah, once you've rubbed in all the butter, should look a bit like this. It doesn't look as buttery as a different sort of pastry, like a sweet pastry or a short pastry, but since we're adding a lot of butter into the process later on, we don't add too much butter at the moment. Just enough to hold it together, really. So after that, so now we're just going to add our water. I'm not going to add all the water since I have added some ice cubes in it and they would have melted. So I'm just going to add it. And don't add the ice cubes in, since they will make your pastry a bit lumpy, as you can expect, and they will add a bit too much water to it. So we're just going to mix this in. I'm just going to grab, usually if you have one, use a usually you'd use a dough breaker, that's it. I can't remember it. But today, since I don't have one, I'll just be using just a bread knife, flat bladed knife, just to quickly mix that together, because we don't want to overwork this pastry. That's a big thing, we don't want to overwork it. So we want it to come together in just a little ball, a nice little smooth bit of pastry. We want it to come together. And after it does that, we're just going to put it onto the thing and knead it just till it's smooth. We don't want it any more mixed than that. So once we've done that, we want to kind of get it, not very good at making rectangles, but you kind of want it in a sort of rectangle shape, since that is the shape that we'll be rolling it out later. And we're just going to glad wrap that and put it in the fridge for the next stage of the process. Just glad wrap it up nice and tight, make sure it's kept its sort of rectangle shape. And we're just going to put that in the fridge, and I'll see you in a bit. Okay, guys, this is the most important part of what makes this puff pastry. So here, between two pieces of glad wrap, I've got about 200 grams of butter, and this is what's going to make a puff pastry nice and buttery, of course. So what we're going to do is I've slightly softened this quite a bit, so make sure you soften it before you do this, otherwise it will take a lot longer and a lot more hard work. You can do it without softening it, but this is much easier, especially if this is the first time you've made it. My cake teacher can do it from hard butter really easily. He's pretty pro at this sort of stuff, but I'm not quite up to his strength level, so this is how I do it. So, I know this looks kind of wonky at the moment, but we kind of want this into a sort of rectangle shape. The same shape is, roughly the same shape as our pastry is going to be. Since this is going to go inside it, inside the folds. So we want it kind of thin, but not too thin. We don't really care if it's a bit thick. We just try and keep its shape. The most important thing about this pastry is making sure that everything stays in a sort of uniform shape, really. So there we go. We've got it. It's about ½ centimetre tall, whatever. And there you go, that's what it's going to look like. So we're just going to put that in the fridge, because we want everything really cold when we make this. So we want the butter to be pretty much as it came in the packet. So I'm just going to put this in the fridge, and then when the pastry's rested, we'll get back into it. Okay, see you guys. Alright guys, it's been about ½ an hour. So we've got our dough here, it's been rested. I've just put a bit of flour underneath it, just a little bit. We don't want too much. If we use too much, it'll ruin the dough. And I've just put a little bit on top. And we're just going to keep rolling this out until it's a nice rectangle. And I'll show you how best to do that. So make sure you have some flour on your rolling pin, so it doesn't stick, because we definitely don't want this to stick to anything. We don't want any holes in this dough, it's very important. And we want to keep it a good shape, make sure that it's really nice shape all throughout, and make sure you roll it out very evenly. If you have to make it a nice rectangle, make sure you pull out the corners a bit. So we need to make sure that this is big enough to fit our butter that we made earlier. Keep shaping it, pulling out the corners. sure that it's even all the way through. If you need to, make sure you keep putting flour underneath it. Keep checking to make sure that it's not sticking. That's probably pretty good for the first roll. I think it's going to fit my butter quite nicely. So that's what it looks like. Make sure that those corners are quite square. And we're just going to put the butter in that. Unwrap the butter carefully because we don't want to break it. It's now quite hard. I'm just going to put it on like that. I'm going to fold it over. Kind of like a package, I guess. So that's our first roll, our first fold, our first turn in technical terms. So we're going to keep doing this sort of rolling over folding method. I'll show you again because it is quite a tricky method to remember. It is quite a tricky pastry to do in general, to get right, although not quite as tricky as Danish pastry, which is the same method. Flour. It's the same method, but it doesn't have any yeast. It has yeast in it. This one doesn't have any yeast in it. So as we roll this down, rolling it firmly, but we don't really want to squish it too much. We just keep rolling it out evenly. And just make sure that it still keeps its rectangle shape. We want to keep that uniform shape throughout the whole process. So as you can see, you can see in the camera, the butter starts to be able to be seen through the pastry. Now we want to make sure that the pastry doesn't rip and we don't see the butter completely. So we're just going to keep rolling that. Keep flouring it. Make sure that it doesn't stick underneath and on top. And we're going to do this quite a few times throughout the whole process. So you will be quite good at it by the end of the pastry. You can make it a bit wider if you'd like, just by rolling it out the same way. Make sure you keep all the sides even as possible. You need a big bench to do this, not that I have one at the moment. But as you find, the thing I've found while rolling this pastry is that if you're right-handed, the thicker side will be on your right side. So make sure you even that out. And if you're left-handed, vice versa, you know. Keep making sure it doesn't stick. I just want to look at this side so I can even that one out a bit more. So this is quite a nice size, really. So next, once I've evened out these corners, I'm just going to do, now I'm going to do what's called is a double turn. So I'm going to fold both sides in to around the middle. Yep. And I'm going to make sure that they're all even, like that. And then we're going to fold it over on top of itself again. Then we're going to turn around so that it's kind of like train tracks here, parallel, coming up this way. So, and then we're just going to rest this now in the fridge again, just for about half an hour, 15 minutes to half an hour. And then we're going to repeat the process. Alright guys, this is it after resting for another 30 minutes. So we're going to do the same process again. Make sure you got flour underneath it, not too much, and flour on top so it doesn't stick to your rolling. Make sure it's a nice shape. We'll start rolling it out. So the idea with puff pastry is to do one single turn, like we did the first time, and then do a double turn, and then rest it. So we're going to do, just roll this out, and then do a single turn, a second single turn. If you feel like you're forgetting how many you've done, just put a little, that means 2, 3, and so on. Just make a little indent with your fingers, and that'll help you remind you how many times you've done it. The idea with puff pastry is to do lots and lots of layers. So by folding it up, we're creating one layer. Because if you remember what puff pastry looks like, when it puffs up, it ends up with lots and lots of different little flaky bits of pastry, and that's what we're doing by just folding it up. That's what we're doing today. So you can do this as many times as you want. Just make sure you rest it well in between your turns, because otherwise the pastry will become overworked and it won't be very nice. It just won't get the right texture that you want from it. So we're going to do a single turn. So fold it about a third of the way in. Fold the other half over. And there you go. Just make sure you shape it. Then we're going to roll it down again. And we're going to do a double turn. So you can make as much pastry as you want with this recipe. Just, double it, whatever you need. But make sure that if you are going to use a little bit more pastry, it makes it a bit easier if you cut it into like 3 different pieces or 2 different pieces and roll it out like that, because it will make it a little bit easier, especially if you've got a small bench base. So we're going to do a double turn. So fold it about halfway. Make sure the sides are even. Fold the next one up to halfway. Make sure they're all even now. And then fold it over on top of itself again. So we're going to rest it again. This process takes a very long time. It is a hard pastry to make, just because of this long amount of time it takes to do it. So it is easier sometimes just to buy pastry in from your supermarket, but it's always a nice skill to have, even if you're not using it all the time. Hey guys, just back. The camera kind of stuffed up, so I haven't got my last bit of the this video, and all the pastry's used up now, but it's okay. So all in all, it took about, I think I did about 7 repeats of the turning all up. It took a long time, but it worked out really well, and the pastry was nice and flaky. So I hope you guys try this recipe. I used it for sausage rolls, which were a pretty simple recipe. So if anyone's interested in that tutorial, I'll just put up the recipe if anyone's interested. So yeah, let me know. And you can use this recipe for other things like pastries, any kind of fruit thing, or savoury sort of thing that you might need puff pastry for. And yeah, it's all in all a pretty easy recipe as long as you know the techniques and you have enough time. So yeah, that's about it, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Alright, I'll see you guys next time.